Welcome to Bonehead Weekly. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. Who am I, guys?
You are a
Every
fat guy
mid
at the Golden Buffet.
No,
every
my
mid
penis.
every mid-level manager dreaming of something better.
I was that.
Well, I mean, I think we all are. We're all mid-level in something.
No, no, I'm no longer mid-level management. I'm not even there. I think I can. I think I can. Oh, wait, no, I just disappointed someone.
I, mm,
Mm,
And you did, but it was too soon. Too soon.
told
I
you.
was gonna say it wasn't us. We were disappointed like over a
My
decade ago.
my penis. So, what is our topic this week? And we did this as a fun size for those Australian bastards.
We're talking about
And also
trains,
Glenn and Ben.
Oh,
which I think out of both all three of us, I think you're the most excited about this because for some reason, and I want to go into this. You get the most excited about trains,
I
I
like
do like
trains.
trains.
but
I
not as
like
much as Joe. Joe like
no.
is
Well, now,
absolutely enthused about it, like
I
uh,
love model trains. Yeah, I
well,
would
now
get into it, but it would be another. I don't need another.
I
Ugh.
have I have more than once paid to ride the train that goes out of Versailles and goes out to the bridge.
I was not aware of this. I
I've
apologize,
only done
Joe.
it
Yeah,
once.
I've done
Actually,
it.
the one that goes to Versailles out to the bridge, I've not done. I've only done the midnight. Oh, jeez. I've only done the dinner train.
No, so there's one, and so we even had one of the kids. Actually, it was back when they were young enough. We did joint birthdays and divided it between the
Mhm.
two of them. And we did it once for one of their birthdays, and we got the air conditioning card. It's quite nice. I recommend it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
So I
love model
apologize.
trains. I
I
think they're so
don't
cool.
so okay, so now I can ask both of you. What's the deal with fucking trains? I don't understand it.
They're
You want to know
iconic.
honestly? Well, there's
Well,
a couple different things. I
they're
agree with
iconic.
Joe.
Okay, go ahead, Joe. James.
I agree with Joe in that they're iconic, but also they're more logical than about 90% of what we do. If you go to a place that has really well functioning trains, oh, I don't know, England, for example, the fact that I can book a train and be from London to Cambridge or London to Oxford, and it's going to run the same time every day, and it's efficient, and it can move, thousands of people every day makes
Yeah.
way more sense than 1,000 different cars moving.
Yeah, those trains are amazing.
And
And
so
go ahead.
I think that's part of it. I think part of it is why don't we like we used to be a train based system back in the old days, and we got rid of them all, and we still have to move tons of cargo by train, but we've so disinvested in them that now it's not safe to do so. There's an entire last week tonight where John Oliver covers how dangerous trains are and how it's actually causing health problems because they have now maximized how long they can be to where they block traffic so much that when people need hospital transport they can't get them because the trains used to take, there used to be a limit. They could only cover the road for something like 5 minutes, and now it's up to 15 or 20, I think, is what's permitted by law. Um, so anyway, but I also think part of it is it goes back to the Wild West and all of that too, right? I mean, that was the sign of civilization coming.
Yeah, it was the
Um,
train.
and
But
so, yeah,
Industrialization.
but again, that's the whole thing. People look at it as like, ooh, it's this amazing thing. It was so beautiful. It was so wonderful. It's but in reality, you're shoved into a tight space with no air conditioning,
You got air
hard
conditioning.
as hill seats.
only if you were poor.
The
Yeah.
majority of you were.
Well, you could say the same thing about ships and planes now.
Planes. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna
I'm not
say.
again. I'm just saying. But the trains and all that, they don't get the amount of nostalgia of trains.
Planes probably do. I don't
Well,
know. I
but
No,
know a lot of
no,
people
no,
like
no.
ships too. I know a lot of people who are into
oh, I
planes.
love
But
cruising.
not does it not
You ever see the Al
planes
Pacino movie
like
Cruising?
warplanes and stuff like that, not travel planes.
I know. I've met. I maybe
Okay, Joe,
the
fine. You
people
met those
I
people. Those people are insane. Train people are even more insane.
I love
No,
airports. I don't like to fly, but I love going to airports. I can't. I just like watching people. I love airports.
I no, but your
I
question's
don't
valid,
ever want to
Chad.
hear you call us weird again, you fucking weirdo.
I
Actually,
well, he just
my son earlier today told me to tell you you were the most. It didn't use the word eccentric. It wasn't really weird either. It was like the crazy one. I was like, why is Chad the crazy one? He couldn't really narrow it down. And he said out of the group. And I said, which group do you belong to, son? There's a whole conversation. But he said
Well, I
Chad
don't
was
want to say
crazy.
anything bad about a child.
Never stopped you
And he
before.
cuts off right there. Um, no,
Never
but
ever
I
stopped you
get it,
before.
Chad. But I agree. But
I just
it's
don't understand the point of trains. I don't understand why.
it.
Well,
Like,
they move people or cargo from point A to point B.
I
But
don't
Chad,
understand the nostalgia
I
about train, Joe.
We
but
have
ultimately,
nostalgia about everything, though. People have nostalgia about blue plates
yeah,
Yeah, and I'll
depression
never
glass,
understand that.
and
depression
depression.
glass. I've never.
Yes, yeah. And what's the
I
candy?
had
What's the
aunts that
carnival glass?
yeah, I had aunts that were obsessed with depression glass and the depression pottery, and I was like, it's
And
nobody
my,
like and all
well,
that stuff was it was cheap enough to get you by. Nobody was buying that stuff because oh it's so beautiful. It was oh it's good enough. It'll get you through.
and if you like models, I don't know how you don't like model trains
Yeah, I just
because they're
don't.
gonna go hand in hand, and that's really what I like is model trains.
I just don't. I don't understand. Again, that's one of those things I don't understand the point of because again, it's just a smaller thing of I understand like the toys behind me I like, but I don't understand model trains because all they do is you build them and then they just go around in a circle all day.
But the
Well,
one toys
Chad, in
behind you
all
don't even
fairness,
move.
isn't that what I do every day? The
Yeah,
same
you're
thing
losing me on this one
over and
because the
over
stuff you have
and
behind you
over
doesn't even move.
and
But those
over.
are nostalgic to me. Trains are not. But then that's fine. I have a reason for that. But I'm asking you, as people who like trains, why you find them nostalgic because I don't
Uh,
get it, Joe. That's
I'll
part
be
of
honest.
this is a conversation.
Well, no,
Well, you're
I
the
can
one getting
actually kind of
aggravated because
answer
you don't
that.
like the answers.
I know I can kind
No,
of
I don't
answer
like
that
He
the
as
gave
answer.
you a
I'm
well.
just
history
I'm
lesson
not
about
I'm
it.
just asking questions.
No, I think I can answer this too.
And your question to me is, well, everybody's nostalgic about everything.
Right,
That's
No,
why
everybody
I'm
does have
I
something
think
frustrated.
they're nostalgic about.
I think that I can answer that. I can tell you why they're nostalgic for me for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
They used to run right by the house. Moorhead had a train that cut through it until the early 90s. And so I can remember hearing them when I was going to bed. I can
Yeah. See,
remember
and that's one
and our
thing.
family farm had an old coal railroad and literally to this day dad well not to this day he's dead now but dad used to go out and walk the old railroad line because they had made it flat
Yeah.
and if something was bothering him and he was anxious he would walk the thing and you could still find railroad spikes so part of my time as a kid was walking those old tracks finding railroad spikes I thought it was the coolest thing in the world to find those.
But the last thing you'd want to do is live next to a railroad track.
No,
Oh
I just
no.
no. See,
Hold on,
that's
let
what I
me
was
do
getting.
the Blues Brothers line. Oh, how often did that train come by? So often you won't even notice.
See,
Notice.
that's what I was getting ready. I was getting ready to actually disagree with you on that, Joe, because part of one of the reasons why I liked where I lived when I lived in Louisville is my apartment was right up against the train tracks, and my wife still doesn't understand this to this day. Is I actually slept better at night because the train went right across my apartment.
Yeah, I don't
So
get
I
that one
actually
either.
love the sound. I love the rattle. That's one of the reasons why I kind of like the trains was I liked the sound they made. I loved I just loved the sound. It was soothing to me.
They're kind of, I know other countries have them and use them much better than us. I mean, for instance, see Japan, but it's very American. It's very I,
I know
iconoclastic
in
of.
terms of our development, it has a historical significance.
No, it's more than that. Yes, it is, but it's also just it's kind of has it's kind of like Harley Davidson in the sense of that's a very American thing. When you see trains, I think most people tend to back to James, what James was saying. You kind of think of the conquering of the West, which is a whole other shouldn't be called that
Which is
anyway,
what I just
basically.
said.
And
But
well, you know what? I'm sorry, Puddin', and nothing I can
No,
tell you
I'm
is
just
going to
saying.
be
That's what I
answer
just
you
said.
tonight.
but but also I think I think it's
You said no, it's not that, but then explain. That's what I just
Well,
said.
but
I apologize, Puddin'.
I
Whatever
think
you stepped on before you got here.
That's okay, Buttercup.
I
I'm
think
not
the oh
mad.
my
You're just
gosh.
not explaining yourself correctly.
I think the flip side of it
I
is the reason there's more nostalgia, I would argue, is because it's our missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Like we have completely cut out trains, and as Joe said, you have the bullet train in Japan. You have England proving that they're still very effective. The fact that
Right.
I can board a train in London and be in Paris before the end of the day, actually within a
That
few
was one of the
hours.
best train rides I've ever been on in my life.
And being able to do that, whereas we don't have that. What do we have? Amtrak, and I'm not knocking Amtrak. Please, Amtrak fans, don't attack me. But if I get on an Amtrak in New Orleans, between Amtrak and buses, it takes me 18 hours to get to Kentucky.
Right.
Well, it's quicker to, and Americans love cars too. So
Well, and that's
when
the
you can do
nostalgia.
75, 80 miles an hour in a car on 75, you're not going to take the train.
Well, if it was an efficient train, I would,
Yeah,
just so I didn't have to
but
drive. But we don't have it.
we're
We
idiots
we've
and we
blown
don't
that
do that.
opportunity.
We blow
See,
all those
I think I
opportunities.
disagree with you on that. I think it's all about where you live too. Because if you're in an urban area like New York, they prefer the train over the car.
Yeah, if you're in New York City, not New York State, but
Chicago,
yeah, New York, Chicago.
those people prefer the train over
Well,
having a car.
and even New Orleans has the trolley system, which works out pretty well if you don't want to
Yeah,
fight traffic and get speeding tickets where they don't
we
even pull
really
you
should be
over
talking
these.
about movies. I just
No,
wanted to
I
briefly
mean
talk.
the point is, but I do love model train. I love looking at them. It would be a quagmire for me to get into, but I would love to. I've always wanted to do like
Yeah, no, you've always been about, and I've just never.
But
It's just one of
they're
those
very
nostalgia.
they're just cool. They're just
but
cool.
to
Just like a Harley's cool. It's not even the best bike by
but
a long shot, but it's very much an American thing. It has a certain I'm trying to think of a good word. I don't know.
well,
I prepared for the movies, but it has a certain gravitas to it. I
and
think
I'm going to go beyond just movies, but I think one of the things here that is really important if we're thinking about this pop culture, I'm hoping I'm not stealing anybody's choices, but dude, I also think it's because we are raised from the time we were born with trains, right? I mean, it's
Mhm.
even when I was younger, if not trains, trolleys, right? What Mr. Rogers have?
Oh well, yeah, no, there's a ton
He
of it in
walked.
media. There's
He
Thomas.
did walk, but there was Thomas. There's
Thomas is over what, three generations now,
well,
I would
and by
imagine,
the way,
and it just keeps adapting.
and who all played Mr. Conductor that are literally people that I'm like, oh my God, Miss Ringo Starr,
George
George
Carlin,
Carlin,
Alec
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 Baldwin.
Baldwin.
Baldwin. Those
Yeah.
are three I know of off the top of my head, and I didn't watch the show.
No, I never did either. I never watched
I
that.
watched episodes with George Carlin was on there.
I don't think I've ever seen an episode with either three of them. I'm sure I've seen clips, but a such full episode, I've never seen it.
But so, and then you even didn't illusion at the beginning, the little engine that could, right?
Yeah.
That little golden book was, I think, handed to me at birth. I think they used to just give it to you at the hospital.
I got it a couple of years ago for my kid, and I remembered it differently once I read it. Then it
Well,
was in my head.
you got the modernized version.
No,
Uh,
I don't know that it translates well to modern society. My kid wasn't as enamored, and neither was I rereading it.
but no, so I think that's the other part about it is it even if you my kids didn't grow up with trains, other than they loved going on that train, the Versailles train out to the Kentucky River, and then brought you back. It's a museum and it's cool and it's cheap. I'll be honest, that's one of the reasons we could afford to do it when they were littler and I wasn't necessarily making much money. Um, but I think that's the other part about it is it's just I don't know. I don't know why it became that, but it's also just a shorthand that's in so much children's literature. The Boxcar Children. I never read them, but my kids loved them.
Yeah, I don't.
This idea of trains being everywhere, and
Yeah.
so I hope I did. I hope Chad, you if you were planning to talk about the little engine that could, I apologize.
No.
Um, but I wonder if that's part of it too. Is that even though my kids have never seen a coal train, have never rode a serious train. Actually, my daughter did go to Japan and ride the bullet train. I didn't get to go, but thanks for bringing it up. Anyway, all these different things, but it's just everywhere in pop culture, I guess, or in children's literature.
Well, it's a lot in movies. I mean, it is an absolute cliche to have a train robbery,
Oh yeah,
and there were so many of them.
yeah,
There's even one in Solo, and that's the problem with Solo is it's the best part of the movie, and it takes place in the third act, in the end of the first act.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So should we get into our movies?
Sure.
Go ahead.
You want
Oh,
me to start? I'll start. I'm not a proud man.
yeah. Go ahead.
I'm going to start actually with a very famous. It's linked to a train. I'm gonna argue this should be relevant. We don't get to know the name of the train, but there's been several stories. But my favorite example is, of course, a song, and we don't get to know the name of the train. A song. It's only referred to as "This Old Engine," but we do learn a little bit about the train and how timely it is, how efficient it is. But unfortunately, its driver has a certain addiction because this old engine makes it on time, leaves Central Station about a
At
quarter
a
to
quarter
nine,
to nine.
hits River Junction at 17:2. At a quarter to 10, you know it's traveling again. Unfortunately, however, driving that train high on cocaine, Casey Jones, you better watch your speed. Trouble ahead, trouble behind. And you know that notion just crossed my mind.
So
We
the only top 40 hit that they had was not that song.
was it Touch of Grey? I really
Touch
don't
of
know.
Grey. It's Touch of
Well,
Grey.
that's also the only original music video they had.
Yeah.
I love Touch of Grey, but Casey Jones has a special spot in my heart. And I'm not a deadhead. I'm not, no offense meant to Grateful Dead. Oddly enough, I have several colleagues and I had several mentors that were huge Grateful Dead fans.
And Mick
Um,
Strawn is a huge Deadhead.
yeah, and so I appreciate what they do. There's nobody that I've other than probably Weird Al, and that probably says more about how I was raised than anything else. But like I love Johnny Cash. I love a lot of these musicians, but there's something about this song that works really well for me as far as it's a narrative song. We we get a little bit of a story there, not a complete one perhaps, but I do love the idea that the Grateful Dead, again, we're writing a song about a train. I mean, it's the story of Casey Jones and the train wreck and all of those different things. And Disney's done a version of it, but I think it lends itself maybe to what Chad was talking about as well. Why does this stick around? Why do we care about Casey Jones?
Why do we have an obsession with not not only that, but riding the rails like a hobo?
I think it's freedom. I think we've talked about this before in another episode when we talked about ne'er-do-wells in music, oddly enough. Um, but one of the reasons that ne'er-do-wells are so compelling is they have no attachments.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of freedom that comes with that, right?
Well,
And
freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Nothing. And that's all that Bobby left me.
well, but and man, this is becoming a musical episode really quick. But I think that's something about the joy of being the conductor or the engineer or what have you of working on a train is it's there's something almost I again I could we could probably do an entire episode on on trains and songs because you also have like Willie Nelson, um, the city of New Orleans. I'll be gone 5,000 miles when the day is done. Right?
Yeah,
There's
you know
something
that one
about the
better than me.
train.
I can't remember the lyrics.
There's something about the fact that the train gets to move on. We don't get to move on. And of course the Willie Nelson song has been done by several other people now as well. But it ends with the idea that that lifestyle's fading, right? The trains are disappearing. He was pointing it out even then. Um, and I think there's something to that. But I think you bring up an interesting point about it is the train doesn't stop. We stop. We have to get off. Casey Jones may wreck and die, but then they'll clear up that engine and they'll bring another one on.
Hmm.
The rails will run.
And then he goes back to helping the turtles defeat Shredder.
I thought he played baseball.
That's actually, I was going to make the joke earlier about the Mudville Nine or something. Yeah. The
Um, but yeah. So that's the one that came to my mind is that's a great musical example, and I brought up Willie Nelson's as well. The city of New Orleans. I'll be gone 5,000 miles today.
So we did a short for this for Good Movie Monday, like I said, and I'm going to pick something different from our first one. This one is from a really good, solid director whose brother always got more attention, and maybe deservedly so. Who knows? 100 years from now, I'll talk about it. Then I've been listened the last few months. I've
Oh,
tried
I
to
didn't know you were
listen.
going to do this one. I'm shocked.
Right. I was trying to be a little more just not on the nose. And I
Hmm.
was listening to a interview with Tarantino, and it's been probably 5 or 6 months ago. And once again, we've talked about this on the show a lot. Is Tarantino somebody who I admire so much and who I think is so much smarter than me, whom I'm pretty sure I don't want to spend the night with. That being said, I agree with a lot of what he says, and I went back and kind of looked at it. And he was talking about Tony Scott, and Tony Scott is the brother of Ridley Scott, but Tony Scott gave us, if you're not familiar with him, he gave us Top Gun and
True
Days
Romance.
of Fun. I mean, I could just sit here for a half a day. And his take was that one of Tony Scott's best movies is we don't even get to it, and it is very enjoyable. It's and he made a lot of movies with Denzel towards the end of his life. It's called a movie called Unstoppable, and I didn't realize it was based on a true story.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, if you allow me, it's 2010's Unstoppable. It's based on a real incident in which the CSX 8888 freight train went 65 miles out of Toledo with no one on board, and in which the train became known as Crazy Eights, ended the same way the movie does, with a brave railroad worker running, jumping, and boarding the train to bring it to a halt. There is something to be said. I read an article once about Richard Donner and one of the last movies he made. I can't remember the name of it. It's the one with Bruce Willis. It's like 16 Blocks, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reviewer was talking about how we miss there's just certain people, they used to call them journeyman directors, and I don't think either one of these are journeyman directors, but you're just, even if the material's here, they're going to lift it to here. And Tony Scott's probably one of those people,
Oh, yeah.
right? If the material's here, he's probably going to lift it to here.
I would say
And
like Man on Fire. I think he did that
yeah,
with Man
which
on
is a
Fire.
weird movie. And
Hmm.
it has an interesting. All Tony Scott's films had interesting looks, whether you liked
Yeah.
them or
Yeah.
not. They were different. He was different. He was much more artistic in this one sense than Ridley.
Hmm.
But Unstoppable is just a really good, solid, and I hate to call it a B movie. And when I say a B movie, I don't mean anything by it in a negative way. I'm not overly interested in Denzel's, even though you get to know a little bit of his private life. I think it's Chris Pine, right? I don't need
Hmm.
to know everything about it. They're just trying to stop the train, and it's just good. And you just get into it, and it's a good movie. It's just a good, solid movie. So when I say it's a very entertaining B movie, I don't mean it in a negative way. I say that about certain shows, like Justified. Like I always say, oh, it's a good B show. I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just, oh, it's entertaining. You could tune in and you could forget about it for 2 hours, and it's not dumb. It just probably doesn't have 62 layers to it. I like Unstoppable.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
watched. I actually just watched it about 3 weeks ago, and it still holds up. I'm a
I haven't
huge.
seen it in a long time, but I was trying to think of something.
I'm a huge Tony Scott fan.
Even the
Well,
movies that don't work are interesting, like Domino. Probably doesn't work, but it's an interesting movie.
yeah, my turn.
Yep.
I have to begin with a movie that has just been, a staple since my childhood. Uh, it's one of those movies that I really, when I say I watched it on repeat, I really did. I watched it on repeat. Like I specifically remember like summers as a kid, I had a VHS copy. I would play it once a week, like not once a week, but like 3 or 4 times a week. Like I would just put in the VHS like on a Monday. The next day I would pop it back in and watch it again. And that is Throw Mama from the Train.
That's on several of the lists.
Yeah, I figured it would be. Um, but it just has a special place in my heart. And I'd actually, I just showed it to my girls um, over Thanksgiving break for the first time, and they really enjoyed it. Thank God. um, and I had to explain to them, there were parts I had to explain, what was happening, but they really did enjoy it. And if you're not familiar with it, it's Danny DeVito. He wrote, directed, co-starred with Billy Crystal. I can't believe I don't have my notes in front of me. I'm forgetting the mama's name. Joe's forget, but when
I'm coughing and taking a drink. I put myself on
It,
pause. Oh,
it's
Jane,
okay.
Jesus,
Um,
from Goonies and
yeah, she's
Scrooge.
from Goonies. Um,
Oh, what is her
um, but uh, but anyway, I'll look that up in 2 seconds. I can't believe I'm blanking on her name. Um, Anne Ramsey.
name?
So it's Danny DeVito, Billy Crystal, and Ramsey. But Danny DeVito's take on an Alfred Hitchcock movie, Two Strangers on a Train, which again is also one of my favorite Alfred Hitchcock films.
Crisscross.
Crisscross. But Danny DeVito is just he plays this weird little mama's boy who doesn't know how to socialize with anybody. Um, and Billy Crystal is this struggling writer whose wife has left him, stole his best screenplay, best book ever, and has taken off and made millions off of it. And he's slightly going insane. And Danny DeVito, like I said, he hates his mom. His mom is this lunatic, crazy woman who Anne Ramsey. And Anne Ramsey, if you haven't seen it, if you know Anne Ramsey from Goonies, you'll watch this and you go, why does she sound so weird? She just had throat cancer. She had throat cancer and just got off surgery with it, so her voice is completely just not what it used to be. Um, and Danny DeVito comes with this whole concept of I'll kill your wife if you kill my mother, and it just spirals from there. It goes into this. It's an absolute dark comedy. Danny DeVito is a master of dark comedy, in my opinion. I think both of you guys agree with me on that. From Death to Smoochie and um, Duplex and on and on and
I've
on.
actually never seen Duplex.
Oh, you should. It's really good. Um, it's one of the few. It's one of the few movies that makes Ben Stiller tolerable to me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I love
That
this movie.
Mystery Men, right?
Yeah, it's a guilty pleasure, fucker.
I'm not knocking. I'll be honest. I caught Mystery Men a while back. It was streaming somewhere, and I caught it. And
But
I was like,
I will
I
admit,
remember.
God, Ben Stiller is the most. If anybody would have been cast other than Ben Stiller in that movie, I think it would have been 100 times better. I don't like Ben Stiller. He's the only part about that movie I don't like.
He's a better director than he is an actor.
I agree. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, and the best part happens on the train I don't know what type of train it is, but the train part is not it actually is not that long in the movie.
Choo choo. It's choo choo train.
Choo train. But yeah, when Joe wanted to do a train movie, it's the first movie that came to my head. So that's the first one I had to come up with. So that's my first pick.
James, what's your
I
second pick?
I'm going to go with one that I think a lot of people won't know, and I hope more people will seek it out. It's because there's been tons of movies, like a more recent example would be Monuments Men, that deal with recovering art that was looted by the Nazis and things like that. But one of the
That movie could have
earliest,
been so much better than what it was.
it's got a great cast.
I know it has a great cast, but so boring.
Uh,
I don't
yeah,
remember it being boring, but it's not one of his best.
Oh God, I was so bored.
I'm talking about the movie that fits right along with this subject, The Train from 1964. Originally, it was directed the first 3 days. It was directed by Arthur Penn and Burt Lancaster, who was the star. Basically fired him and brought on some upstart named John Frankenheimer. John Frankenheimer took it over because Arthur Penn viewed it as a serious rumination on this one, Burt Lancaster's character,
Hmm.
obsession with art and why he wants to preserve it. Uh, Frankenheimer felt more like Lancaster, that there was this great opportunity to, yes, that's part of it, but it also has to move. It has to have some action to it. And so the plot of The Train, it's loosely based on, and my French is terrible, um, but the nonfiction book Le Front de l'Art, uh, the front of art, which was about the war front and about how the Nazi Germany.
You could have done that more Frenchy.
I'm sorry. We.
Now,
Anyway,
Thank
now
you.
what you do is when you say he says you can do that more Frenchy, dig deep and do your best impersonation of what's her face as Frenchie in Grease.
oh, yeah. Well, it's been a while.
That's a deep
Uh,
cut. It's a deep
um,
cut.
Hmm.
But the
anyway,
Grease
no.
people out there know what I'm talking about. Her and that other guy were the only two that came back for the sequel.
Um, but yeah, so the plot to the film is, and it is based loosely on a real story. Um, the when the Germans had sorted what art they wanted to keep when they were leaving occupied France, when they were being driven back by the Allies, the movie follows the German commander who has decided what they're going to take back to Germany, which is not played by Lancaster. Lancaster plays a part of the resistance, and there's a great scene when, and it's really a really compelling scene because it has that moment when the resistance, the leader of the resistance says, "We're not risking human lives for art," and then later on, because he won't get involved because he says it's not worth human life. People who value art are trying to stop this train and dying, and one of them happens to be a friend of his, gets killed trying to stop it. And he goes, "Okay, we if it means that much to these people, we have to preserve it as part of our life, as part of our culture. Let's stop that train." And what makes the film really compelling is that honestly, you don't know who's going to win. It goes back and forth
You mean
convincingly.
between them and the Nazis?
Yeah. Um, uh, uh,
I've
uh,
never seen it.
about how far this train is going to make it and are they going to be able to stop him from getting it? Because if you think about it, what's really compelling, and if you watch the trailer, there's scenes where like planes are dive bombing the thing and trying to stop it and all that stuff. And some of that's in the movie, but not much because you have to think about it. They can't damage the train really either because it will destroy the art. And so, how do you stop, this, I don't know, 4,000 ton machine without damaging anything that's on it? They can't just, so even when they try to think of things like, oh, well, we need to damage the rails to where the train can't run on it. Well, they can't just damage the rails to in such a way that the train will wreck because then that art's gone. And so they do a lot of unique things. And it really, I mean, ultimately, you kind of know where this movie's going to end up, but it does a great job, especially for a movie made in this time period, of showing how efficient, how ruthless this German commander is in I was told to bring this back. It's coming back. And it's really a compelling film just to see, and it really does show, actually, to Chad's earlier point, it really shows the power of what a train could do in wartime. This is not a heavily armed train. This is not but this is just a machine that is going to take something from one group and take it to another group. And they have to find a way to stop it or at least delay it. And I think that's what also makes it compelling. It's not even necessarily they have to stop it, they have to delay it because they know the Allies are coming. And if they can just slow it down enough, they know the Germans will have to abandon it and then they can reclaim it. So it's not we got to completely stop the train. We've got to just slow it down. We've got to do something. And all the different ways they have to come up with, all the tricks they use, everything else, knowing the land better than the invading team does, all that stuff, the invading army does. It's again, it's not for modern audiences, it won't feel like a thrill a minute, but if you like something that has a building tenseness to it, there's a stress level throughout the film that really carries well. And so if you've never seen The Train, again, directed ultimately by John Frankenheimer with 3 days of footage shot by Arthur Penn, starring Burt Lancaster, it is a compelling little movie. I say a little like, but it's a compelling film. And it was the first to kind of play with that idea of we have to preserve the art. There's been several movies that have done that since, but it was the first to kind of adapt that type of work. And it was based on, again, an actual nonfiction, but let's remember, loosely based. But check out The Train.
Okay. I'm going to do another one with a B movie plot that actually has a lot of something that Tom Holland said when I was doing the director panel. And what was he say? What did he say was important, gentlemen? Do you all remember?
Nope.
Character.
Oh, character.
This movie's got characters in it. Because let me tell you, last 2 or 3 months, I've happened to see a couple of movies from the genre that are pretty good, but I'm so sick and tired of this genre. And every time I say it, another month or two, there's something comes out and I go, well, shit, that's pretty good. Zombies. There'll be either a play on demon zombies or regular zombies or some sort of, I don't
Well,
know,
you took away
rage
you don't
infused.
you took away my conflict over my next pick.
Oh, some sort of just whatever it is. But the Train to Busan
Great film.
is
Yep.
fantastic. And it's about a divorced dad who's trying to save his daughter when the zombie apocalypse takes over a train. I mean,
Hmm.
they're taking over, and that's the plot. I'm not missing anything, am I? I mean, it's not that complicated.
No, but the
But
thing is that the people on the train don't know it's happening, and they're unaware that it's happening.
and it's you get to know the guy, you get to know his reasons, you get to know his daughter, you get to know some of the people in the car with them. And if you actually are invested into what Tom Holland said, character, believe it or not, you feel bad when some of these people don't have a sunny day at the end of this. And let me tell you, most people in Train to Busan do not have a happy ending.
No,
And it is gut wrenching,
it is
literally and figuratively. And it is just a fantastic movie with just wonderful performances that takes place, let's see, the first 20 or 30 minutes, and the rest is on the train.
train. Yeah. And one thing else, I don't want to take your time up talking about the film, but Train to Busan, it introduced me. I'm going to butcher his name, but in America, he's known by Don Lee. He was in the Eternals, but his Korean name is Ma Dong Seok, I think is how you say it. He is like one of my new favorite action stars. I've watched a ton of his South Korean action films, like The Roundup, The Outlaws. Oh crap! Now I gotta look it up. The Unstoppable. He does all of his South Korean action films are fantastic, and I would never have discovered them if it wasn't for Train to Busan. Um,
It just doesn't let up. It's like another reason why I said unstoppable. It kind of starts and doesn't stop till because it's unstoppable to
and
stop.
by
It's
the
the
way,
same.
he's the guy with the broken arm, the big muscular guy. If you're familiar, if you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
sorry.
No, it's okay. So Train to Busan. Yeah. If you have never seen it, check it out. It's streaming. It's a really good movie. And I get shit from Scarefest reviews sometimes about reviewing things that are dubbed or have subtitles.
Are you serious?
Yes, Chad. I believe it or not, I have other assholes in my life who just will message me going, "Really? It's another movie that's subtitled or dubbed?" I get that. Yes, I do.
Uh,
Yes.
sorry.
That's
I was just
okay.
surprised that people are still that way of I won't
It's
it's a
not
dubbed
often.
film.
It's not often, but if you can conjure some sort of criticism, I have had it thrown at me. So you just,
There's so many more other things to criticize you about though.
I appreciate that.
You're
Just
welcome.
grow the skin and go on. So I highly recommend Train to Busan.
So my next pick is not going to be a shock to either one of you because we talked about it pre-recording. Uh, we got to talk about Midnight Meat Train and just how it, guys, it may be, well, Nightbreed. I might like it might have been better than Nightbreed.
The
It's my
thing is
favorite
with
Clive.
Nightbreed, even with the director's cut, it's still Clive Barker
It's flawed.
is a very flawed, uneven movie. Even
Yeah.
Hellraiser, as much as I like Hellraiser, it's a very flawed, he's just good at I don't know, but it is
Midnight Meat Train is not. Maybe it's my favorite Clive Barker film.
well. I don't know. Well, how do you decide that? Do you do the only three he directed, or the ones that are adapted from his works?
I look at the ones that are. I mean, Lord of Illusions. I mean, what other ones are there? I mean,
Or
what
there's
would you?
only three that he directed. It was Lord of
Right.
Illusions, Nightbreed, and Hellraiser.
Yeah.
So that's the
Um.
reason I said which group do you throw it into as far as
Yeah. I
I
mean, I
mean
don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing it into
Midnight Meat
his
Train is the best adaptation of his work.
work. Yeah, that's what I'm referencing it
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
But
It's a
man, if
bleak
you,
movie.
yeah, yeah, it's bleak, very bleak. Which other than Throw Mama from the Train, have all of our train movies been bleak?
I think Unstoppable has a fairly
No, Unstoppable is like, yeah, it has a happy
that's a
ending.
positive one. And
except for
then
poor
and
Ethan
cocaine,
Suplee.
there's nothing bleak about cocaine, James. You good job, James. Good job. Nothing has brought us more joy than cocaine.
Cocaine.
Riding
Um,
that trail.
for if you're not familiar with Midnight Meat Train, basically this man he is on a train and finds this weird dude and becomes obsessed with him and starts tracking him, and then craziness follows.
Yep.
And I don't want to give away too much because if you haven't seen it, it is batshit insane. And Vinnie Jones is the tall, quiet man who he stalks.
It's actually his best performance.
Oh, Joe.
What's better?
Bullet
Uh,
Tooth Tony Snatch.
yeah.
Okay, maybe.
Whereas yours says replica down the side.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mine says
all right.
desert.
I thought you all were going to throw something else. All right, maybe Snatch. But
What
it's
did
been
you
a long
think
time
I
since
was
I've
going
seen
to
Snatch.
throw at you?
I don't know. There's a
Gone in
ton of
60
him.
seconds?
I forgot he was in it.
If we learned anything from poor Tony's plight, it's sorry.
X-Men 3.
Oh,
He does
I'm
have
the
that great
juggernaut.
line, "I'm Juggernaut,
you're
bitch."
not bitch. Ugh. No. No. Bullet Tooth Tony, Snatch, wait, that is his best performance, followed by Midnight Meat Train. Um, Bradley Cooper before he hit it huge. This
And
was his
his best performance. I forget he's in it. I that we talk about movies that are forgotten.
yeah.
Sometimes they're probably not. That's one that was never even known, much less forgotten.
No, and we saw it in the theater.
It's all at the Dollar Theater.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it just came and went and nobody talks about it and it just shocks me to this day. I thought it would at least develop a cult following and it never did.
If it does, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's all about him riding on this subway train, just trying to figure out what is going on with this man. And it's one of those movies where if the dude would have just not been a moron, things would have been fine.
Yeah, basically.
So that's my first pick, that next pick, Midnight Meat Train. James, up to you.
James, bring us home.
Um, oh man, there's just so many, but I think so on the short version, I of course talked about Dr. Emmett Brown's Time Train for our Australian friends. But
They don't have time in Australia. You got to explain that to them.
well, they don't have time trains. Those are American. Doc Brown was a good American.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Um, but so
No, he
I
wasn't. He made arms deals with
did he give them the weapon, Chad?
you don't know what he did before that.
Chad,
He
you
had to
We
got-
get
know
those
he didn't.
connections.
We
He had to
know he
get those
didn't give.
connections somehow.
Yeah, but he didn't follow through on it. So actually, didn't he actually help America's cause by not arming them and taking their money?
Mhm.
He actually defeated the Libyans for us, Chad. How many times have you had to fight the Libyans?
Six.
What
I
day
think
is it?
I think you should thank Doc Brown for that. Anyway, so I love Back to the Future, but there's another franchise that I also love, and I'm going to have to talk about it. And I don't think you could undersell the impact of this one part of the film that actually returned this character to kind of a heyday. Because this was a multimedia event. Uh, People still fondly remember the video game that was based on this film. I'm talking about GoldenEye. I love all the Bond films, but GoldenEye really did. It came because a big part about GoldenEye, and my kids, I can't get them to understand it, but for a long time, Bond worked because we were afraid of the Russians, and GoldenEye is all about Russia had fell, the Berlin Wall had
Yeah,
fell,
absolutely.
all of this stuff, and I can remember even my parents talking about, well, what are they going to do Bond film about? And my dad especially because he loved Bond. What are they going to do now? What's that going to be about now? And GoldenEye, I mean, from the very opening credits, is about, oh, well, this is what Bond's going to be about now, right? It's going to be about all, just because our quote unquote big enemy is gone doesn't mean that we're safe or that there's not a need for spies or anything like that. But anyway, the train part of this, if you haven't seen GoldenEye, and I hope you have, but if you haven't, check it
It's
out.
been a minute since I've seen it.
Um, so the plot is at the very beginning of the movie, you follow 006 and 007, Bond being, of course, 007. on this adventure on this mission, and 006 doesn't make it out. 006 is played by somebody that's well known to most of us today for dying all the time. Sean Bean. Sean Bean plays Alec. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, don't worry, you'll still enjoy the movie. But spoiler alert, Alec doesn't actually die. He comes back as the villain, and his code name is Janus. And Janus, by the way, for those mythology experts, you'll know, is the two-faced god. So anyway, he comes back, but his base of operation, because they never can find him, and the reason they can't find him is he has taken a Soviet missile train that was used to transport weapons and things like that and turned it into his base. And one of the coolest scenes in the movie is he's on his base. He's, of course, manipulated everything. He thinks he's going to ultimately win out against Bond. And here comes Bond, now played by Pierce Brosnan, after Timothy Dalton's. This was Pierce Brosnan's first Bond film, in a tank.
And it's only his only good one.
And he derails.
I like no, I like no, hold on, which one's the one?
I do
The
like
fact
the
you have
world
to think about it this long.
I like
No,
the world
I can't
was
remember
not
the names of them, Chad. I can't
Which
remember.
one is it then? Who's in it?
I like the one about the paper guy.
Tomorrow Never Dies.
Tomorrow
Because
Never Dies. I like that one.
The original title was Tomorrow Never Lies, and it was a typo.
I knew he was going to tell this.
Well, it's true. Look this up. I'm not making this up. It was a typo because the allegedly it was the secretary. I don't have data to back that up, but allegedly, she was so used to it always being death or a time to die. You know, which Bond films have a lot of death mentioned in them. And so she made it Tomorrow Never Dies, and they liked it better, and that's how it became because the idea was
oh man, the one with Michelle Yeoh and Terry Hatcher, really?
I like Die Another. Well, it's been 20 years since I've seen it. I didn't particularly. I wasn't actually overly fond of GoldenEye when I saw it in the theater when it came out. I like Pierce Brosnan, but I wasn't really overly fond of any of the movies. I also like Die Another Day. However, that's the worst Bond song. That is the worst Bond song ever.
The best.
But I do like the movie Die Another Day.
The best Bond song of the Pierce Brosnan era was Shirley Manson Garbage. The World Was Not Enough.
The World Was Not Enough, which is that may be the worst Pierce Brosnan one.
I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, but back to our train thing. So it's really it's how often do you get to see tank versus train in a movie? And
every other day.
Well, maybe. It depends on what movies you watch. But interestingly enough, this actually appeared in the video game as well. But in the video game, you have to board it as Bond, and you have to make your way through it and save, of course, the Bond girl. The train itself is solid black. It's, of course, made to look more futuristic than the diesel trains would have been in Germany. Or not Germany, sorry, in Russia during this time period. It is an absolute compelling idea. And it follows a tradition because there is actually a counterpoint to this. And in some ways, some people have alleged that this is Bond playing a slight wink and nod to another spy franchise that actually was inspired by Bond, but then became its own thing for American audiences. And that would be the other spy that used a train as his base of operation. That would be James West of the Wild Wild West. And their train, by the way, if you watch the original series, was called the Wanderer, and it was their base of operations. So there you go. Trains have been part of spy work for years for various reasons. And so while I have to give Janus's base of operation credit, I also wanted to give a little bit of a nod to the Wanderer from the Wild Wild West. If you've only seen the movie, go back and watch the show. It was a lot of fun and kind of
slightly ahead of its time.
Yeah. I mean, it was a modest hit at the time, ran for a few seasons. Mm-hmm. much the same way I would argue Briscoe County Jr. was ahead of its time in some ways, and I
Yeah,
love Bruce
and they're
Campbell.
very similar as if they're science fiction shows. Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
old
Yep.
Western science fiction shows. Yeah.
Yep. So yep. So The Wanderer, a little bit of shout out to Wild Wild West the series, but then also definitely watch Goldeneye if you haven't for a great train versus tank battle.
All right. I'm going back in time a little bit with mine, but not back to the future. I'm going to the train movie that gave us one of the great comedy duos of the 20th century, 21st century. I forget which one we call it. And I'm going back to 1976 and Arthur Hiller's Silver Streak. He gave us Gene Wilder and Richard
Yeah.
Pryor as a comedy duo. And if it did nothing else, even the fact that most of it takes place on a train, if it did nothing else, it gave us that. Also gave us Gene Wilder in blackface, pretending he was black, which would probably not happen today. That we tend to not recognize. Yes, but keep
But
going.
but the reason that scene works, and I agree, it would not be acceptable. They actually Ben Stiller
That
says he
just
couldn't
wasn't.
get away.
Whatever you're about to say, I probably agree with it because you're right. He's an idiot. But keep going.
Well, Ben Stiller has said that he couldn't even get away with doing, and his entire point was to mock how terrible it was to do blackface when he did Tropic
Yeah.
Thunder, and he says now they wouldn't even let him do that. Um, but I think the reason that scene works on any level is you have Richard Pryor coaching,
Yes, on how to
and
do it. That's and trying to teach him, and he clearly can't do it.
yeah, and that's it. The entire thing, like to be honest, watching that movie when I was younger, when I was a kid, I probably watched it when I was too young, and most of the jokes that were inappropriate went over my head.
Hmm.
And I'm sure I watched an edited version for TV. But the scene I remember is him trying to get him to walk, get the
Yep.
walk down. And that's the part of that entire scene I remember where Gene Wilder can't do it. You're absolutely right.
Yep.
And it's Richard Pryor being so frustrated and also such a bad teacher in that role of trying to get him to be able to pass as anything but Gene Wilder,
Yeah.
or Gene Wilder's character, I should say. So,
So
yeah.
the story is he's just an overworked book editor who takes a vacation and gets on a train and ends up having kind of a slight romance with a woman played by Jill Clayburgh. And then all of a sudden he witnesses a murder and he has tried to save his life while he's on the train. And basically, Gene Wilder is the star, and we forget it. Well, I don't know if we forget. Probably a lot of people don't even know this now, but Richard Pryor had a little problem with cocaine, is the secondary person in this movie. It's not till the other films that we see them as co-leads. And he plays a thief, and they have to team up to survive. And it's just some of it's dated, some of it doesn't quite work. And I'm not even talking about the blackface thing. I'm just saying some of it doesn't quite work with the humor. But everything with those two together is pure cinema magic in that film. Probably the same for Stir Crazy and a little bit of See No Evil, Hear No Evil. But it just works. And it gave us one of those great comedy duos that we actually only got 4 movies out of. And I guess we're lucky we got the 4 movies out of them.
Yeah.
So mine's Silver Streak. Directed by Arthur Hiller, 1976.
I'm pulling a James Thomas. I got to. Joe, I'm going to see if you get it with this riddle. Why did the dead baby cross the road?
Even I got that one.
Well, Blaine the train and Blaine
That's
the
it.
pain.
Blaine the mono. Blaine is the pain, and that is the truth.
Yep.
I had to do this one. This also popped in my head when we decided to do trains. I'm like, do I do the James Thomas? Do I go book?
I mean, it has to be the only story in history, in literature, where a bad guy is defeated with dead baby jokes.
With dead baby jokes. Exactly. And it's also one of these ones where we keep hoping we're going to get a movie or a TV show, and it just doesn't come.
It's so
And
difficult, though.
and it
It's
hasn't, and the Dark Tower still hasn't been made. It hasn't been made.
it's so complicated. It's so big. So
Yeah.
much of it is so weird.
Yeah. And this is one of those examples of
Yeah.
Blaine the mono,
Who loves riddles?
who loves riddles. If you're not familiar with what we're talking about, Blaine the Mono is a character from the Dark Tower series written by Stephen King. He is a bit of an antagonist to the gunslinger. Um, they need to ride Blaine the Mono to get out of the wastelands. Um, and Blaine is a sentient monorail. He went insane just because he has lived such a long life,
Yep.
and he's become suicidal, and he decides to kill himself at the time that Roland and his group are in the train.
Hatet.
I
If
was
that's how
gonna
you say it. I
I was
can't.
gonna say Katet, but I didn't want to go that specific.
The Katet.
Um, but the only way that they're going to be able to defeat Blaine is to outriddle him, basically. So they proceed to just keep dropping riddle after riddle after riddle as Blaine is driving them to their death. So they just keep this hitting with all kinds of riddles, and they can't stump him. Like, feed me and I live, give me drink and I die. What am I? He says fire. I occur once in a minute, twice in every moment, but not once in 100,000 years. What am I? The letter M. Um, and then Roland, he uses some of the riddles from their
Hmm.
world. I am emeralds and diamonds lost by the moon. I am found by the sun and picked up soon. What am I? Do.
Hmm.
Nothing defeats him. The only thing that defeats him is when Eddie, is it Eddie? It's
It's
Eddie,
Eddie, who's an ex-drug, who's
drug user,
drug
just
user.
look just looks at him and says, why did the dead baby cross the road? And it just kills Blaine right there and then because he cannot solve the riddle. And that's how they get out.
Dead baby jokes. Yeah,
Dead
yeah.
baby Joe. Um, and it's just such a good train example
Well,
for
that's a
our
really good
podcast.
book.
It is.
That's probably the one of the more accessible ones.
Yeah.
Well, the first three are fairly accessible.
And this is from Wizards and Glass.
No, it's from the Wastelands, isn't it?
Wasteland, sorry.
Book three.
Book three. Um, so yeah, I had to talk about Blaine the Mono, even though there's one other honorable mention that I had to bring, but it could not surpass Blaine the Mono.
Go. What's the honorable mention? It's time for honorable mentions anyway.
Oh, I gotta do Money Train.
Really?
What do yeah,
The follow-up to White Men Can't Jump. We're not
yeah,
going to do a sequel. We're going to do a big action movie with these
movie.
two.
Yeah, Woody
Everything that
Harrelson.
worked in that, boys, don't worry about that. We got the two of them. That's all we need.
But you
That's
know
all.
why? Do you know why I gotta do Money Train?
Now I have not a clue because it has a
Robert
killer in it.
Blake.
Because it actually has a real killer in it.
Yeah, Robert Blake.
Yeah.
He plays such a wormy villain in that movie. It's worth watching.
If you get a chance, Ed Begley Jr. a few years ago wrote an autobiography, and I haven't read it, and I should. And apparently, he and Robert Blake had breakfast often. They were really close.
Which is a
And
weird combo.
I, dude, Ed Begley Jr., I'm telling you, just go listen to some interviews that because his dad was Ed
Oh,
Begley who won an Oscar.
Yeah.
yeah.
And so all these years of Hollywood and always living there, he just has lots of stories. And Robert Blake, he said, yeah, Robert Blake did it. He packed a gun. I didn't have air conditioning. If you know anything about Ed Begley Jr., he was all about climate change and things from the
Yeah.
early 80s, an electric car from the early 80s.
Yeah,
And
he powered his house by having a bike outside.
yeah, he
Yeah.
didn't have air conditioning, and it was Southern California. And Robert Blake would come over, and he's like, "Yeah, but it'd still be in his jacket behind." And they'd have breakfast all the time with Robert
Yeah.
Blake sitting there with a gun, and he was going through a divorce, and his wife, not Robert Blake, but Ed Begley, his wife was leaving him, was taking, and the new guy was spending all this money that he was paying his wife. And Robert Blake takes out the pistol, and goes, "Well, I'll tell you what I'd do." He's like, "Yeah, of course he killed her."
Man,
He's a
why
buddy, but yeah, he killed her.
why am I blanking? What was the detective show that he did? Why am I blanking on? I love that show.
Oh,
I don't
Mannix.
remember.
No, it's not Mannix.
It's not Mannix.
You talk with the parakeet?
Yeah, it was
I can't think of the
cockatoo,
name
wasn't
of it. Yeah, it's a cockatoo or whatever. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it?
I can't think of the name of it.
Oh, I love that show. One of the best
Beretta.
things.
Beretta killed that
Beretta,
guy.
Beretta.
Why couldn't I think
Beretta.
of that? Because
Yep,
that's Dave
Dave
Chappelle.
Chappelle.
No, no,
Beretta,
Beretta
Beretta
killed
kid.
that guy.
Beretta. There's the first episode of Beretta I ever saw hooked me on it because literally they're I can't forget they're kidnapping a girl and they take him too, and they realize he's going to break out, that he'll be able to outsmart him, so they force feed him liquor the entire time. And I remember watching that. I was relatively young, going, man, that would be a good way to make somebody incompetent. It'd make them not be able to fight back. And that's the entire plot to the episode. Is he finally like eventually, of course, they do get out and he saves, but he literally there's a scene where they force fed him enough liquor. He looks at the girl that's being kidnapped and goes, "Listen, I this is going to get worse, and I'm not going to be able to do anything." And it was one of those like cliffhanger moments in the episode where you're like, man, this is more effective than a lot of detective shows were. Plus, it again had that great Sammy Davis theme song. Keep
There
your
are,
eye on the sparrow.
I'm sorry, but there are so many train movies, and so many of them are actually pretty good. There's
Oh,
some,
there's a ton.
there's just, I mean,
I didn't even
actually,
get
I
into
enjoyed Bullet Train.
I didn't
Huh?
even get into. Oh, I thought you didn't care for Bullet Train.
I
It was
love Bullet
okay.
Train.
I
I
didn't
love
love
Bullet
it, but
Train.
it was fine on Netflix.
I loved it. I
I
enjoyed
enjoyed
it.
it a
I
lot.
watched it twice actually
The
already.
Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. Actually, both versions don't
Oh
suck.
my God! Why did I forget about the Taking of Pelham? It's one of my favorite movies.
The only reason I didn't do it is because we've talked about it on here before. Another great one is 310 to Yuma. Both versions.
Oh my
Actually, the
God!
remake is slightly better.
I want to bash myself in the head. Those are two of my favorite movies, and I forgot about them because I don't look at list.
One of the worst ones is Money Train. I don't even remember the plot.
They're subway. They do the sub. They're not cops. They work subway like they're kind of like cops that work the subway, and they decide to rob it because Woody Harrelson is a gambling addict and gets in trouble.
Brad Anderson's a wonderful director who made one good movie, Session 9. Well, he's made a
Yes.
couple, but I'm not
What's
a
the
big
other one?
machinist. A lot of people love The Machinist, but I think they just love Christian Bale weighing 80 pounds.
Yeah, that movie is beyond predictable.
But Trans-Siberian is one of those that's on a lot of these lists that was okay, but is not memorable.
I don't remember. We watched it. I don't remember anything about it.
So I know Woody Harrelson's in it. Sorry, but it's on a lot of lists. And we didn't, and James, you didn't even I thought you'd at least do Agatha Christie.
Yeah,
And then you talk
that's what I
about
was getting ready to
Murder on
say
the
before
Orient
you.
Express.
That's what I was getting ready to say when you said there's so many to mention. I was like, yeah, we didn't even cover Agatha Christie.
Well, I've got a ton of honorable mentions, Joe. When you're done, I'll throw mine
Oh,
out.
I can just keep going.
I'm
Go.
so kicking myself in the ass at 310 to Human. I forgot 310 to Human taking a
And there's
Pelham.
one left as soon as you're done, James, that I'm going to say.
Okay, well, I'll do my honorable mentions if I don't hit it, but there's a few that if I don't bring up, I think some people that listen to the show might hurt us, or might be like, "Well, you can bring up." Um, One, and it's not a major part of the film, but it's such a beautiful scene. Um, the Sea Railway, which is part of Spirited Away. If you've ever seen Spirited Away, Studio
I
Ghibli.
need to. I'm lacking when it comes to
Um,
that.
Yeah.
studio, the scene is just beautiful. So if you haven't seen it, here's why it's beautiful. It's not a major part of the film, but it just uses music and the visuals. And the Sea Railway is this train that runs over the water. The rails are right underneath the water, so it looks like the train is just running, skimming across the water. It's a beautiful scene.
Yeah.
I mean, for live action animation, whatever, I don't care what you're into. If you can't watch that and be like, oh man, that was creative. It's creatively done. Um, I've got to bring up the Hogwarts Express from Harry Potter.
I mean, you
That
really do. There's just so many people. And
I
it's
mean, it's if
it's
you've never seen
iconic.
the movie
You know
and
what it is.
you go to Universal, you're gonna and you get the park hopper.
You have to get
You
the park
ride
hopper.
it between the park.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a key part of that experience, and it's part of what how everything comes together. So I think that's another major one. And then the Polar Express.
Yeah, that was on my list, and then I just backed off of it because it although the movie gets criticized a lot. I feel like that's one of those that broke a lot of walls down. And even though certain scenes in it, like where one of the elves doesn't have legs,
Yeah.
somehow that got missed. I mean, when it comes to motion capture, it's one of the better ones.
And the other, I could keep going as well, but I'll end on one of my favorite ones, and I didn't do it because I've talked on the show before about it before, and that's Snowpiercer,
Yeah,
which has now been a TV series,
Damn, I forgot about
and
Snowpiercer too.
it's
it's a
on so many
manga.
of the lists.
It's been a manga. It was written by a French author. Blah blah blah. You can look at it a ton of different ways, but I got introduced by the movie with Chris Evans, um, and it is just honestly, it's compelling to watch. It's dystopian. I love dystopian literature anyway, so a dystopian film is right up my alley, and it just works so well. And it's still you can interpret the ending how you want. Is it hopeful? Is it hopeless? I don't know, but just the idea that there's been this class struggle and this debate and this fighting for so long. So yeah, I love Snowpiercer. It may be one of my favorite movies to revisit. At different occasions. So yeah, I could go on, but I think that's enough honorable mentions out of
Yeah.
me.
Well, the only other one is, and the problem is the only reason I didn't pick it. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Is that it very actually just a minute little bit takes place under this planes, trains, and automobiles, but only about 5 minutes of the movie is actually about
Yeah.
the train.
Yeah.
All
It,
right,
it,
well, go ahead.
no, I'm good.
This is
Oh,
Jim.
uh, no, you mentioned it earlier, but Great Train Robbery. You alluded to earlier. There's been so many heist films. I do recommend. I have a soft spot for it. Donald Sutherland and Sean Connery in the Michael Crichton version update of that and the only reason it came to mind, and there's a stupid line in it. Um, have you ever heard of the 60 miles per hour club, where they're using a woman to seduce the guy? I just that scene pops into my head occasionally. Anyway, that's sorry. I wanted to throw that one out too.
That's
I'll
okay.
shut up.
This has been Bonehead Weekly.